Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Better Together Facebook Live. My name is Barb Roose. I am your host, and I want to say hello to everyone out there. This Better Together Facebook Live is a chance for us to gather together. And it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you've been through. Here on this Facebook Live show, we want to find the hope, the help, as well as the practical next steps so that we can all get better together. And it is now a couple of days in the summertime. And yet, as we find ourselves trying to just navigate all of the things that are happening in our world, for me, this Better Together Facebook Live is a precious opportunity to speak hope and peace, as well as God's promises into your life. And so if you are joining for the first time today, I'm so glad to have you. Hi, Anita. Thanks for joining. For those of you who are tuning in live, go ahead and say hi there in the chat. This is an interactive experience. And so throughout the broadcast, there will be questions that I'll put on the screen. And as you can see there, I'll be able to share your comments as well. In fact, I want to kick off, and tonight we are talking about hope, hoarding, as well as favorite summertime reads. And so I just posted a question, what are your favorite summertime reads? So if there's anything that you are reading right now, tell us about it, share it. Tonight, I'm going to share with you my favorite summertime read, as well as we get a chance to talk to the author of my favorite summertime read. So go ahead and chat in the comments. Hi, Christina. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's good to see you. Hi, Melinda. Loredana, I hope I said it right. Hello, hola from Honduras. Tell my friends that I said hello, hola. Oh gosh, and since you guys know that my Spanish is not that great, I had to stop at hola. So the next time I see you guys, I will try again to get better on my Spanish. But tonight's broadcast is all about a secret issue that many of us either are facing or there's someone in our life that's facing. And so a few weeks ago, I got a copy of a brand new book. And it took me only 3 days to read it because it was so compelling and amazing. And so the book is titled Afraid of the Light, and it's by Cynthia Ruchti. And Cynthia is with us this evening. So I want to read the introduction, and I want to give you a chance to see Cynthia's beautiful face while I'm reading the introduction. So let me go this way. So Cynthia Ruchti tells stories hemmed in hope through her novels and novellas, nonfiction books, devotionals, and speaking for women's events and retreats, drawing on 33 years of writing and producing an on-air radio broadcast. Her books have been recognized by the Reviewer's Choice, the SALO Awards, CR's Best Choice Awards, Carol Award Honors, Christie Award Honors, Family Fiction Reader's Choice Awards, the Forward Book Review of Book of the Year Honors, and more. So you guys, this is a special treat for all of us. Cynthia is the professional relations liaison for the American Christian Fiction Writers. She's been privileged to write and publish more than 30 books, with more contracted. Cynthia and her plot-tweaking husband live in the heart of Wisconsin, not far from their 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Since 2017, she's also served as a literary agent with Books and Such Literary Management. And friends, this is a special treat because not only as you saw, Cynthia has received many honors for her incredible work, but I met her in 2014 at a writer's retreat. My first book had not been published. I had no idea what it meant to be an author. But at that writer retreat, Cynthia was one of the very first people to come up, give me a hug, and make me feel welcome. And so for me, she is one of the people that I deeply admire in the writing industry. And I'm excited that I get a chance to share her with you. So ladies, please join me in welcoming my friend Cynthia. Hello.
Hello. Man, now what do I do? Now what do I say after all you did?
Well,
I remember that first meeting time too so well. And I fell in love with you from minute one. And we had such a great time just sharing about what our concerns were, and then reaching and just embracing one another in that concept of we're in this together. We're better together. Interesting how our very first meeting was all about that.
interesting. I absolutely love that. Well, I am so glad that you joined us. Our friend Vicki Heath, she is saying hello. And another friend, Susan Hoekstra. Hi, Susan. She says two of my favorite people at the same time. And so we're glad that you're with us, Cynthia, especially because we are celebrating your new book titled Afraid of the Light. So when did this come out?
Last Tuesday, just a week ago. It's only been out for a week, but it's been brewing in my heart for a long time. So I'm really grateful it's now out in the market so people can get it and read it.
Well, it is summertime, and so we're gonna talk about the book because summertime is a time of year where we like to relax and read for the summer. And what is it about summer that makes us want to just settle down? Like summer and winter, those are two times when we want to read. What is that all about?
I think part of it is that in the summer, we assume that our schedule is supposed to be a little different. Whether it really is or not, we kind of assume that we ought to be able to take time and sit in the sun or sit in a lawn chair or sit by the pool, or we need to have a book to take with us on vacation on the years when we can go on vacation. And I think that's part of it. I think with winter, we have that sense of cozying in and curling up with a quilt and a cup of hot chocolate, but really reading is an all year round event. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Well, as I told the audience, and I already sent you a note that Afraid of the Light, I read baby in 3 days because it was gripping. And you mentioned that this book has been in your heart for many years. The brief synopsis, friends of the story, I'm going to read just a quick synopsis. And then, Cynthia, you're going to tell us why this book meant so much. It's about a clinical psychologist named Camille who she works with hoarding clients and the distress of their families. And she loses her mother to the crippling anxiety disorder. So she'll go a long way to help others who are dealing with the pain. And so audience, I'm throwing up a question right now for you in the audience. Have you ever known anyone who struggles with hoarding? And why do you think that people keep it hidden? So make sure, let's not put in any names or put anybody on blast, but tell us about your experience. And then Cynthia, why was this book just something you wanted to write about?
You know, many people have asked me, do I know a hoarder? Was my mom a hoarder, or my dad, or my grandparents, or someone? Am I a hoarder? And until I started writing the book, I was pretty sure I wasn't. And then realized that there were some areas in which I was hoarding that I wasn't even conscious of at the time. But what really got me intrigued about the idea is that almost every hurt or pain or dysfunction or grief or grumpiness or anything that we're facing, and especially as they relate to heading into the mental health issues, there's always a story behind the story. I don't know if you remember the commercial that I've seen it a couple of different times, and it kind of recycles once in a while, about people, the doors of an elevator opening. And we, the listening audience or the viewing audience, get to hear their thoughts, not just what's happening to them. So it may be that the woman that in the elevator is wiping away a tear, but we get to hear her internal thoughts about what just happened, or the job that she just lost, or they're supposed to say hello to one another and act as if life is normal, and they're devastated by what's happening at home. So I'm convinced that there's always a story behind the story of whatever anybody's going through, whether it's a smile on their face or tears in their eyes, there's a story behind it. So in this particular instance, my heart was for those that I could see on TV who were dealing with hoarding issues, the big kind of sensationalized television programs. And then I would hear about friends who maybe their mother had passed away and they were gifted with the task of taking care of their mother's hoard. And all they wanted to do with it was take a bulldozer to it, but they knew that they would dishonor their parent, and they weren't sure, they never could resolve the issue of why was she even doing that, and it caused such rifts in the family. So I wanted to tackle a topic like that and really dig in.
I believe that the struggle for us, especially if because we see the television shows, Hoarders is the one that we identify with the most, and I think for all of us, we see Hoarders and we don't understand it, it doesn't make sense, and then we feel an overwhelming, compelling need to go clean up our house.
Right.
But the actual struggle with hoarding itself, is it more or less? Is it overreported, underreported? What kind of research did you find out?
I obviously had to do a lot of research to write the book, to write it well. I talked to some clinical psychologists too to make sure that I wasn't going too far out of the bounds. There's a disclaimer in the book that there were obviously things that for the story we had to adjust a little bit that wouldn't be what would happen in real life in order to make the relationships work. And some of those things, privacy issues, we skirted around a few of those, but made that disclaimer on purpose so that we could tell the story. But in digging deep into the research, I discovered there are millions of people that have some layer of a hoarding problem. And for some of it, it becomes that addiction or the clinically defined hoarding disorder. Millions of people, it becomes that. But it's one of the most underreported because it's one of those things that needs to be kept hidden. The curtains are drawn, the curtains are pinned shut, the door is shut, nobody comes into the house. The hoarder typically can't stop, but doesn't want anybody to know what they've become or what their house has become. Dear friendships are broken because they don't want to let even a dear friend in. The siblings or the parents or the children are blocked off because they may want to help, but they're helping in all the wrong ways or contributing to the issue itself and aren't equipped. And that's just basically the thing. The families just aren't equipped to know how to deal with it.
Well, we asked the question for the audience if they've ever known anyone who struggled with hoarding. And so a number of ladies commented, and thank you, ladies. Anita mentioned that she does know a hoarder, and it's sad. Susan also said the same thing, shame and fear of intimacy. And Melinda, she says it's something hidden because of shame. People who appear to be functional in the world, but are drowning in an unhealthy attachment to stuff. I believe we would be shocked by the people in our lives who are plagued by this. And Anita came back and said they don't always know what they're doing. Yeah. And in fact, you talk through the book through these characters, and we're going to talk about the characters in a moment. But for us, you said there's a couple of different kinds of hoarding that may not always be things stacked up in a home. But what are some of the kinds of hoarding that we've got to be aware of for ourselves?
Sometimes for a hoarder addiction person or a hoarding disorder person, it will be an accumulation of worthless things, completely worthless things, like things we would consider junk or garbage or broken and irreparable. Sometimes it's things that they believe have value, but it's not necessarily obvious to the rest of us. And that may have been why I collected owls back in the 70s. They seemed valuable to me and not necessarily to anybody else in the household, little ceramic owls and things. But and oftentimes for us, we collect things that are just things, but when we start to get obsessed with it, or we start to spend more money than we have, on it, or we start to find ourselves shopping late at night in the darkness when no one else is watching. An excessive accumulation or excessive purchasing can be part of it. But there are so many other layers, like the spiritual things that we collect or the emotional things we collect and hoard and keep and hide from other people. It could be a grudge that's piled on top of a grudge that's piled on top of a grudge until all it takes is one little something to tip it over. And we're tripping over it every day. We try to go through our life avoiding it. You can only do that for so long. And pretty soon you're going to trip over it and break a leg or break an emotional leg in a sense. There are so many things that we hoard in the way of even past victories, if that sounds weird, but sometimes we're clinging so tightly to past victories or past accomplishments that we don't move forward. We just collect them around us. We draw them like they're a little protective blanket around us, and we stop growing. And there's no room for anything else to come in. Oftentimes it'll be the anger that builds, and it's putrefying, but we still keep it coming. And that's true in a lot of people's lives, I believe.
Ooh, that is powerful. Well, in the book itself, your main character is a psychologist named Camille. And she dedicates her life to helping folks who are struggling with the hoarding anxiety disorder. How did you create Camille's character? What did you love about her? And what were some of the parts of her journey that you really enjoyed writing about?
You use the word enjoy, and now I'm going to start with, I knew she was deeply wounded. I knew from the beginning that she was very bright. She was very intelligent and deeply wounded. I didn't know what it was right away when I began to write. And then, honestly, when I started this book, I had what I thought would be the first page or so and the very last paragraph. And I didn't know what was going in between there, but everybody writes differently. And for me, this was the path I took. That it turned out it wasn't the very, very beginning. I couldn't start it until chapter 2. It's now, I believe chapter 2 is where I thought I was going to start, where she's approaching the house of a hoarder. But then I discovered that there was more that the reader had to know before we could get to that moment. And as I began to flesh out this character, I knew she was so intelligent, deeply wounded. She fast-tracked through college, but that was because, and this comes out early enough in the book that I can share this part, it's because her mother had a hoarding addiction, and she was the wounded child. She was the child who believed her mother was choosing things above her. And it was so destructive in their relationship. And she kind of vowed that she was going to take the opposite path, and that she was going to help other people not have to go through what she did. But through the process of the story, many readers are going to find that she was still clinging to something, many somethings. And sometimes we, in this era of wanting to clean up and tidy and only hold on to the things that give us joy, we find ourselves throwing away things we probably should have kept, or stripping down until it's not homey. And don't you dare spill chocolate milk on the floor because that messes with the ambiance, little child of mine. But instead, so we have to take a real careful look. We can get just as addicted to not hoarding as we do to hoarding. What I found in myself was that I was clinging to paper that was unnecessary. Because when I first started writing and first started researching, and even in college, I began to file away little slips of paper, magazine articles, newspaper articles, poetry that I found interesting, whole copies of magazines because I wanted to read that article inside one of these days, which I never got around to, and it piled up and piled up. And then the day came when I needed to get everything out of my office so that we could refinish our hardwood floors. Everything out of the office. in 2 days. And the problem was pretty immense, I realized when I figured out how many 4-drawer file cabinets I had full of things that were no longer useful. But I kept them because I thought they might be someday. But then it turns out that information that we had in 1982 might not be relevant anymore. But there it was. All, some of it was in Rubbermaid tubs waiting to be filed, and some of it was in actual file folders. And I did a ruthless job of taking care of the papers because I'd been studying this subject of what does it mean to hang on to things that are no longer of value, not to you or anybody else, and you're tripping over them, and they're in the way, they're changing the way you function, or they're just hanging around there in the background, influencing your mental health, even though you don't realize it. Like, I can't operate well in chaos. Well, there was chaos over on that right-hand side of my office. Back here, it all looked great. But over on the right-hand side, behind this one cupboard that nobody could see what was stuffed back there, was way too much stuff, way too much junk. And it could be useful to someone else. And that was wonderful. The fact that I could get rid of it means that I'm not a pathological hoarder. But the truth of the matter is, just like a lot of people, there's something that we realize we're clinging too long. And we need the freedom, the spiritual freedom, the mental freedom, the emotional freedom to be able to let those things go and live a life that is healthier.
And in the story, as Camille is working with Chester and Allison, and Chester is an older gentleman and Allison, and both of them, when she shows up at their house, they both have that same kind of struggle. They don't necessarily want to let her in, and they're holding on to items that have disintegrated, that have degraded, things that they have had for decades, but they really feel a personal pain in letting go. Mm-hmm. And so as you were writing their characters and researching, why is it that we hold on to things? Why does trauma cause us to hold on to things that are even broken? Is it a kind of symbolism as to what's happening inside of us?
Oh, I think oftentimes it is. And I think the professionals would say so too, that very, very many times, almost 100% of the time, in a true hoarding disorder, in a true hoarding addiction, you can trace back to a moment in time or several moments in time where there was a traumatic event or a deep, deep loss. Grief can be a trigger for this. Sometimes it's generational, but even when it's generational, when it's passed down from one generation to another, that tendency toward hoarding, the actual diving into the hoarding is often spurred on by something that's a deep, deep heart wound. Many times it's the loss of someone that they loved. So they hold on to the broken things that somehow seem like or feel like they connect them to that person who is gone now. Or it could be a grave dishonoring that happens to them. They're shamed somehow. And that moment of shame that is so real and so awful triggers this thing that if these things can protect me, or if these things need me because the person I thought needed me left me, then I will cling to these inanimate objects that I'm the caretaker for. And if I can protect them and not let them be thrown away, then I'm fulfilling this role of being needed by something, if I'm not needed by the someone that I wanted.
Ooh, well, that's very, very powerful. And in Allison, who is one of the characters that Camille works with, for Allison, there was a trauma in her life, and her hoarding disorder had a negative impact on her relationship with her children. And I appreciate how you wrote so respectfully about her hoarding disorder. And a lot of Camille's work was to help Allison to get her feet wet, to see that there was this bigger life that was beyond. But there was a lot of fear for Allison. So there's something that I want to read. If you're just joining me, friends, I'm talking with Cynthia Ruchti. This is her new book called Afraid of the Light. Here's the cover. As I told the ladies who've been here from the beginning, I read it in 3 days. This is your summer read. But this is at the start of chapter 32. And Camille has a podcast. And this is one of the things that she had written. She said, when pain is more familiar than freedom, its pull is like the difference between a child's horseshoe magnet or a fashion magnet that holds a cardigan closed, and an electric magnet that picks up heavy loads of scrap metal. The tug, the attraction is exponentially stronger. Those who've weathered extreme pain without complication of addiction know where the switch is at that disables the electric component. But addiction fogs visibility, forces the addict to paw around in the dark. Many never find the switch. And those who do locate the switch, one that takes many years to engage, experience both the euphoria of release and the lingering fear that any escape from the pool is temporary. And so as the book goes on, we get a chance to see the patients that Allison's working with. Each of them experience unique breakthroughs in their own way, not that the problem was solved. And so what were some of the moments of hope that you want readers to pick up on as they're reading this story, when they're thinking about struggles in life or maybe struggles in their own life?
You know, sometimes when we have a medical issue and it's very, very serious, and the doctor says, this will heal, but it will take time. It will take a long time. We don't like hearing that it's going to take a long time, but boy, do we feel a lot of hope that it will heal, that it is possible. And I think sometimes when we're thinking about hoarders, we're thinking about that. We're the professionals who are skilled at this will come alongside and try to help the person with a hoarding disorder understand this is possible to heal, but it's going to take a long time. Are you in this for the long haul? And when family members agree, when the family member says, I'm in this for the long haul, yes, we won't go at my pace. My pace is, Mama, get out of the house. We're cleaning this place up. You'll feel so much better about it. Trust me. You get this apartment clean for once and you'll love it. It'll be great. And the problem is when the things go away, the person doesn't feel free. They feel empty. They feel lost. All their tethers are gone. But the family member that sits down and listens both to the professional and then to the hoarder, when they can start some communication that isn't shame-based, when they can start some communication that is compassion-based, when it's based on the idea of love being the foundational principle, and hope for the future being a foundational principle, then that makes such a difference. And then we have the ability, we've got room to work. And even if we know it's going to take time, we have hope because we've let in the light. In some ways, there's symbolism in the story too, just about the idea of with those curtains closed shut and pinned tight and the door not opened even to those who are trying to help. When the door comes open, even if they have a hard time sliding in because it's not a very big opening, that's a victory all by itself. We'll celebrate the victory. It's a principle that we see with almost everything we do. There are a lot of problems happening in our world today that we don't have answers for. But if we will sit at the table with compassion and a listening ear and knowing it's not going to be an overnight fix, it's going to be a long time, and respect for the other person, and with an eagerness to learn what we don't already know, and bring in the experts if we need to. It applies to just about any problem that we're facing in life. But listening is often the last thing we want to do. We want to fix. We want to fix. And so much fixing has to be hearing and listening and embracing and understanding first.
I love that the main character Camille, because she's a clinical psychologist, her job is to listen, and her job is to go at the pace of her
Mm.
clients. And there were a couple of moments where there were some deadlines that were outside of her control, where she did have to step in and give them some pointed choices.
Mhm.
But she still knew that it had to be their journey. And I believe that, like you said, the compassion and listening is such an important value that we can all bring. And so, as we are wrapping up, what were some of the lessons for you that this book taught you?
I think one of the key lessons was I don't that there that there is much more mental health disorder around us than we know.
Mm,
It's We're not dealing with it well,
mm,
for the most part, because we don't know what to do. We also don't know where to
mm,
go and look. But if we discover, and this is something I'm learning more and more every day too, if I take the time to listen and then to investigate and find out that which I don't understand should not scare me. Instead, that which I don't understand should um, compel me to draw closer so
mm,
that I can understand better. That was one of the biggest lessons that I got out of it. It doesn't just apply to hoarding, but to many, many other things too. And I also my compassion really grew when I had to, as I'm pretending to be Camille, the character, when I'm writing her scenes, and and um and the way that she approached her clients, it really built my compassion too. That's I want to aspire to be the good things in her, and I want to
mm.
aspire to be the good things in Eli. Eli was another character in the story who, he in many ways, he was teaching the teacher because he just plain loved, and he wanted to help, but he did, as just as you said, I love that line, wanted to help at the pace of the person who was healing. So those are among the things I learned. Is there something in particular that stuck out at you?
For me, the biggest takeaway was the going at their pace.
Mhm.
That Camille, she knew that the overall big picture wasn't about her. She didn't put the focus
Mhm.
on her, even though she felt the pressure of wanting to help them because of her own struggle. She still kept it was their best interest in mind. It wasn't that I have to fix them. She was more of, I want to be a part of walking with them and ultimately being open handed about what they were able to do and what they weren't able to do. And that was repeated over and over again. And that was just so powerful for me because there were times in a couple of the scenes where I was like, yes, you have a chance, clean it all up.
But don't
And
you think, oh, excuse me, don't you
go
think that really
ahead.
applies to so many arenas of life too? So many arenas of life, especially grief. If someone's going through a period
Yes.
of grief and we want them to get over it, come on now, it's been a year or 2 years or 6 months or whatever it is, we oftentimes want to hurry along the healing process for someone. And that rarely helps. There are times when, yes, as a good friend, we will be better together, and we will come alongside and nudge someone along. But even that has to be done so prayerfully and carefully, tenderly and sensitively, or we're going to wind up making it worse instead of better.
That's right. Well, I love the fact that this story was a story that I can tell that you put your heart in. And thank you for the listeners that joined in. Heather wanted to chime in and say hi to Cynthia and Lakeisha. Thank you, Lakeisha. She said going at their pace is so good. My mom actually jumped in. You were talking about just the mental issues of hoarding and some of the mental struggles. And so that was mom's question there. And So ladies, Cynthia and I have loved having a chat with you, but here's the thing. You can read the story in her new book called Afraid of the Light. I put the link there in the broadcast description, so you can click on the link, grab the book, and you will be able to settle in and read it. And the beautiful part about the story is that as you get engrossed in Camille and Eli and Chester and Allison's story, you also get a chance to walk through and use this for your own life. And so, Cynthia, you wrote it beautifully and brilliantly. Lakeisha said that she loved this. She's a premature widow, and so about the part about grief and not being hurried along, you blessed her with those words.
I'm so grateful. So grateful.
Wonderful. Well, friends, I am grateful for you for joining us this week. I hope that if this episode was a blessing to you, that you will share this episode on your page so that your friends can tune in, find out more about the book, Afraid of the Light, as well as this powerful discussion that Cynthia and I have had. So thank you for joining us this week. Anita Billion, you are the winner of this copy of Afraid of the Light. So I will be sending this to you. And friends, join me this Friday for another new episode of the Better Together podcast. Thank you, friends, and have a great night.